They were immobile with astonishment. They believed their strategy could work, but now their true motivations were revealed. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. The cruise ship Housekeeper caught them red-handed with their shoe. Their ambitions were abruptly halted by the evidence they presented. The couple was really ashamed. They made sure their laundry was pristine before mailing it in, but for some reason, they neglected to adequately clean the shirt. Upon discovering the couple's true intentions, she made a substantial demand for money from them. "To clean up this small mess, it will cost $5,000, she remarked, gesturing to the stained garment. It had been 13 years since the beginning of this whole ordeal. The couple started to make plans for their retirement as they got closer to that age. For Shirley and Roy Miller, this moment had been long in coming. When they retired, their goal was to live out their goals, having worked hard and saved every dollar. That day was rapidly approaching. The firms where they worked had already started to make arrangements for their retirement. Less than a month would pass before the pair eventually retired. They had complete control over their money and time as soon as they received their checks. Then, the main issue emerged. After all this time waiting for this chance, what would they do? Throughout their marriage, they had discussed this day often and thought about a lot of different things, but there were some important things to think about. The couple considered relocating to one of their kids' homes. Together they had 3 children, although some obstacles stood in their way. After reaching adulthood and starting their own families, their 3 children besides, the grandparents had no desire to meddle in their lives. That was not a possibility. A care center was the next alternative, but neither of them wanted to go there, especially not at their age. What then remained? Would they hold on to their home as a financial asset for the future? Would they turn to their kids for help? Would they fulfill their lifetime ambition to see the globe and eat in Europe? Shirley always wanted to travel the world and see Europe, but she was never able to fulfill her dreams. After graduating from high school, she got married, and her first kid was born in less than a year. She committed the rest of her life to becoming a stay-at-home wife and mother. She never had time to take care of herself since she was always taking care of everyone else. Roy could see the effect their retirement was having on his wife since it was looming large over them like a black cloud. Shirley had always persuaded herself that she would get the chance to travel and see the globe, but now she knew that her time was limited. Roy was adamant about making things right since he loved his wife more than anything or anybody else in the world. It was his responsibility to resolve the issue. He made the decision to talk to his wife about the matter while seated. "It seems like all we ever did was work and raise the children. We were never allowed to take care of ourselves," Shirley sobbed to her spouse. Roy felt his heart breaking inside his chest. He needed to take action in this regard. Roy saw that Shirley's primary concern was that she was unwilling to part with all of the plans she had created over the years. They didn't want everything to fall apart because they didn't plan things out correctly because they had given up all luxury for their family. However, what action could they take? That evening, Roy found himself in front of the internet, searching for other choices, while Shirley was sound asleep in their bedroom. When Roy happened over a Miami advertising for a new, reasonably priced cruise ship, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The old guy clicked the link out of curiosity. When he saw the pricing, he was in disbelief. It would be less expensive to stay aboard the cruise ship than to reside in an assisted living facility. Roy searched for several cruise ships for hours that evening, but he found one issue. At their age, Roy wasn't sure whether they could manage anything like that. It would not be an issue to cruise at all. It would be when you stopped. For however long would they be in the dock? Could they truly continue to come and go for the remainder of their lives? He needed to talk to his wife about this because the outcome may make or break the whole strategy. But Roy had to consider things before he could say anything. After a few more hours of settling the differences, Roy was left sitting there with more questions than answers. Now, what would he do? He questioned if it was really feasible to spend a significant amount of time living on a cruise ship. He wanted to live on these ships, not just take a few voyages here and there. Roy worked on creating a budget and figuring out how much it would cost the couple for the remainder of the evening. Roy had no idea whether his strategy was legal, but it seemed like the best option when he saw the data. Shirley had been glued to the internet all evening, attempting in vain to arrange their future. She patted him gently on the shoulder to wake him up, and as soon as he opened his eyes, excitement shot through his body. What he had found the previous evening had to be shared with his wife. Roy tapped the seat beside him, a wide smile lighting up his face. Although Shirley was obviously perplexed by what was going on, she gasped when she saw the laptop. Is that actually the case? Had he managed to find a way? Seated next to her husband in front of the computer, Shirley watched as he showed her image after photo of the amazing ships he had discovered the previous evening. His wife was grinning sadly when he turned to face her. "What's the matter, honey?" he questioned, taken aback by her abrupt change in attitude. She didn't appear to be very enthusiastic. Roy asked his query, and then there was an unsettling hush in the room. The elderly man was baffled as to why. He considered he reasoned that this would make his wife happy. She sighed regretfully. "This seems lovely, but we could never go through with this." Roy scowled, perplexed by her remarks. "Our existence is not limited to foreign waters. These cruise ship owners will throw us off when they find out that we are actually living on their ships," she said. "Then we won't have a place to reside. It is all simply too dangerous. We are too elderly to take such risks." Roy's heart fell as he heard such remarks. "I was envisioning us moving from cruise ship to cruise ship and seeing the entire world," he stated with sadness. Roy was aware that his wife was correct, but for a split second he wondered what it would be like in real life if they followed through. He had never taken a chance on anything before. They were usually cautious. Roy was thinking these things, but he wasn't aware that he was really speaking them out. Roy gazed down at his wife, realizing what he had done. Would Shirley consent to assume the chance? Roy sincerely hoped so, but he was totally unprepared for his wife's reaction. How did she react to the notion, and what did she think of it? Shirley withdrew from her husband and dabbed at her tears. "We need to resume our business. We have a lot of planning to do," she stated, guiding the conversation back to what would be safest. However, Roy's thoughts about that cruise ship were still lingering in the background. Roy was not aware that he was the only one kicking about the notion. Though Shirley pretended not to entertain the possibility, she was finding herself considering it more and more frequently. Shirley continued to ponder over Roy's proposition for days on end. She sat him down to listen to him one night. After hours of conversation, they agreed to take a break and consider their options. During his study, Roy saw an advertisement that gave him an audacious notion. He shocked Shirley by arranging a trip to 3 nations she had always wanted to see while she was preparing lunch. He told me about his impromptu scheme during lunch. Shirley was both happy and shocked. She was excited about the trip Roy had planned this time. He proposed it as a short respite before they looked at relocating to a retirement community in Minnesota. Joyous at the proposition, Shirley consented without being aware of Roy's entire scheme. They arrived at the harbor, eager to begin their journey, 2 weeks later. Roy waited until their journey to bring up the subject once more. Weeks passed quickly as they traveled to different locations and made new friends. They preferred their new routine over their home life. Roy came to the realization that he preferred this lifestyle, traveling and enjoying exciting cruises rather than being confined to a nursing facility. Roy joked that he might spend his entire life on cruise ships. Looking out at the black ocean that night, Shirley, who detested retirement communities, considered going back. Unaware of the full implications, she consented to Roy's plan out of sheer spontaneity. The thought grew on them over time. Roy and Shirley both cherished the idea of traveling the world without end. They started taking the concept seriously after weighing the financial implications and determining that it may be a wise decision. They made the decision to take another trip to test their idea and make sure it was a great one before committing totally. Would they be able to continue that lifestyle, though? That inquiry had a yes response. It was less expensive than a care center, and there was always a doctor on board. They might also cross items off their bucket list. The couple was enjoying the time of their lives as the years went by. They traveled from cruise ship to cruise ship, visited places they never would have imagined seeing, and encountered things they never would have imagined. They believed it to be the finest choice they had ever made. However, that would alter on their subsequent voyage. They were always troubled by the same thought: what would happen if the corporation discovered what they were doing? The event occurred on a Caribbean cruise that the couple had scheduled for their subsequent trip. The pair had always taken care to keep their true intentions from the employees hidden. However, everything would alter on this fateful night, all thanks to a cleaner who was driven by greed. The couple made the decision to have supper and dance that evening. They noticed someone leaning against their room's door as they got closer. Although her clothes indicated that she worked on the ship and her trolley identified her as a cleaner, they were unable to identify her. After insisting on going inside with them, the cleaner performed an unexpected thing. She inquired about a spot on Roy's shirt that she had taken out of her cart. Shirley said that Roy had cut himself on a counter the night before while wearing the shirt. Before the cleaner arrived, she neglected to wash it. After disclosing that she was aware of the couple's covert activities while aboard ships, the cleaner threatened to get them fired from the firm and wanted $5,000 to be silent. Shirley, aware that the cleaner would suffer repercussions for blackmail, remained resolute and challenged the cleaner to report them. But Shirley was prepared. She called the local news when they arrived at their next port. The cleaner's actions embarrassed the corporation, which issued a public apology. The business did not stop there. It also dismissed the cleaner and upgraded the couple to VIP status, giving them lifetime access to free cruises. Officer Joe was waiting out the storm alongside the road as it was pouring fiercely in Missouri. Still, when he witnessed a young black man sprinting toward an elderly woman, everything went haywire. You won't believe what the policeman did next. Dark clouds had accumulated over the sky, lending the environment a sense of impending dread. Periodically, a brilliant burst of light would occasionally zip across the sky, briefly illuminating the whole planet before exploding. Then, thunder that may have shaken the earth quickly followed. That was the exact amount of rain that fell. Strong winds buffeted structures from every direction as it arrived. Since everyone with half a brain was wise enough to have sought cover, the road was deserted. After all, being outside in this type of intense rain is one of the worst things that can happen to a person. Joe Holt, the officer, was no exception. He was comfortably nestled in his police vehicle. Even though he could hear the rain beating down on the car's roof, he was unconcerned. He kept an ear out for any emergencies brought on by the deluge while he listened to the radio. Before going back out into the streets to continue his patrol, he was waiting for the rain to finish. A second lightning strike pierced the gloomy sky. He pondered what was going through his daughter's head at that very time. She was terrified of thunder and lightning, and he could only image how terrified she would be at a downpour of that intensity that was accompanied by powerful gusts. He wasn't really concerned, though, because he knew his wife was with her at home, so the young child wouldn't be overly afraid. But then he started to think about phoning her when he thought about them. He was aware that his young girl's confidence would be greatly boosted by hearing his voice at this particular moment. But as he reached for his phone, he spotted something strange occurring outside the car, and his hand stopped in midair. In front of him, parked in the glaring rain, was a vehicle. He saw the door slide open, letting a teenage lad of African-American descent leap out and take off running. Joe followed the youngster's gaze with his eyes and, much to his surprise, observed that the boy was moving toward an elderly woman who was shakily making her way to her car. As Joe saw the kid approach the woman, a lot of things went through his head. Sensing peril, he had his fingers hovering over his doorknob, ready to jump out at a second's notice. This particular police officer, Joe, was always a vigilant police officer. He was a cop who had always been steady and trustworthy. His passion for the work was evident in the way he performed his tasks. He performed the work as though he sincerely desired what was best for the community, not just for the payday at the end of the month. His goal was to become a police officer who anyone could approach and feel at ease with. That's why he was afraid the adolescent lad was going to harm the elderly woman when he spotted him racing towards her. He pulled the handle and tried to open it, but the strong gusts forced the door back and it slammed shut. The strong sound of rain took away what would have been a deafening boom. Just as Joe was ready to yank the door open again, he saw something else strange about the youngster. The small kid hurried to the old woman, pulled off his jacket, and covered her with it as it was pouring rain, keeping her warm. Joe was shocked to see the youngster leading the elderly grandmother toward the automobile. This was a totally unexpected gesture of selflessness. Joe initially believed the youngster was going to assault the woman when he saw him leap out of the car and dash in her direction. He was glad he was mistaken. Joe was in awe of the boy's altruistic gesture as he used his weight to support the mother and shield her from the inclement weather. He lifted his phone gently and snapped shots of them. When at last they came to the woman's automobile, Joe kept watching. The lad led her inside the door and shut it tightly after assisting her in opening it. The child hurried back across the park to the van, slid the door open, and stepped inside, now completely soaked from the rain. That's when Joe saw there were two individuals in the front seat, and both of them were deep in discussion, and he was positive the adolescent hadn't said anything to either of them before helping the woman. He noticed a lady in the car, and he had a strong feeling that she was the boy's mother. This delighted Joe even more since it implied that the grown-ups in the car had not instructed the youngster to assist the elderly mother. Since he had chosen to do it, it was evidence that he was a decent guy at heart. Joe found he was having trouble staying still while he sat by himself in the automobile. He couldn't wait to tell the boy's mother the wonderful news he had to share. They had to know what he had done, and he knew that the good lad would never bring it up if he let them go. Still, that meant Joe was stuck inside when it started to rain. He was stuck in his police car until the rain stopped, just like the youngster and his mother. After falling steadily for more than an hour, the intensity gradually decreased until it ultimately became a light drizzle before ceasing altogether. The air had a clean, fresh scent once it was finished. He inhaled deeply as the fresh scent filled his nose as he wound down his window. Just as he opened the door to approach the van, he noticed that the back lights illuminated, indicating that the vehicle's engine had started. As soon as the van pulled out of the park, he got back into his car. Then he started chasing after her. He was going to tell the boy's mother what he'd done, no matter what. He followed her slowly as she drove through the mostly deserted streets. The rain had stopped, and automobiles and people were once again lining the streets. The trapped people started to emerge from concealment. Joe didn't ask the van to stop until they reached a more open section of road with less people around. He opened his door and ventured out into the cool night air. Then he walked up to the van and gave the driver's window a gentle tap. After a few moments, the window slid down slightly, revealing the woman's face. She was staring at Joe's outfit, looking both afraid and perplexed. She could tell by the expression on her face that she was in danger, but she couldn't conceive what she had done to deserve it. Joe told her right away that none of them were in danger, and she wasn't. He said there was another reason he was there. Pointing to the adolescent lad seated in the rear, he said, the woman wanted to know what he had done to the police officer, her eyes widening with panic at that moment. The child then assisted an elderly woman getting into a car, Joe informed her. The mother's jaw dropped wide in disbelief at what she heard. She was in shock that he had gotten out of the van for that purpose. She believed he had gone outside only to relieve himself. Joe reassured her that her kid was brave and that he was affected by what he accomplished, which is why he wanted for her to be aware. He also showed her the photos he had shot of the child assisting the elderly grandmother by pulling out his phone. She started crying as soon as she saw the photo, especially when Joe had pulled up on her. She had been absolutely scared that her kid was in trouble. He stated he was sorry and that he had no other choice than to use the megaphone or the sirens to gain her attention. Tyrese was the boy's name, he learned as they continued their conversation. Joe was informed by the woman that Tyrese's actions were typical for their family. These were the morals she had been reared with, and she had made sure her kid had them too. That was the extent to which she valued compassion. She understood the significance of Joe taking time out of his hectic day to come tell her this, so she was grateful for the gesture. She told him how much it meant to her and expressed her gratitude. Joe informed her that he should be the one to thank her for raising such a wonderful son and that she didn't need to thank him. He then complimented her on a job well done raising him and expressed his hope and prayer that Tyrese would do great things in life. Tyrese was taken aback that the police officer had noticed him when he thanked him for being such a good man. He informed Joe that he regularly did things like that and didn't think it was a big issue what he had done. Joe was even more amazed by that. Tyrese has a golden heart even at such a young age. Joe felt confident he would have accomplished a great deal of good by the time he reached adulthood. Joe stayed with them for a few more seconds before letting them get out of the van and resume their journey. Joe went back to his squad car and went back to policing the area. Even though he worked as hard as he could, he was unable to take Tyrese's noble deed from his thoughts. All he could see in his mind was the image of the teenager who jumped into the rain to save the elderly woman. The world wouldn't be such a bad place to live if there were more individuals like him. This inspired Joe to post about the experience on Facebook, which helped Tyrese gain notoriety. In the caption, Joe opened out completely, sharing how moved he was that a little child could show such kindness in a hateful and envious society. It really irritates me how much hate there is motivated by race, sexual orientation, color, or belief. The young man's sole concern was being kind, Joe said, adding that he was very much looking forward to seeing the young man again, even though he knew it wouldn't be simple. Despite their brief encounter, he stated Tyrese had grown to be very important to him and he was eager to see the adolescent lad again. Therefore, he requested that Tyrese and his mother get in touch with him if they saw his ad. "Kiddo," Joe said, "this guy owes you a dinner if you see me on the street again. I'll be the one rushing to you if you ever need anything." He uploaded the photos after he was finished. As fate would have it, the post quickly gained massive popularity. The post was widely shared, and Tyrese received a great deal of acclaim for his actions in the form of likes and comments. They admired how compassionate he was by nature, and how, even at such a young age, he already possessed these attributes. Finally, a week or so later, Tyrese's family members spotted the message. They instantly recognized the person from the images and let them know. The fact that Joe had spoken about their experience and shared it with the world astounded both mother and son. Sincerely, they had believed that they had seen each other for the final time. Tyrese was relieved about this and delighted to have reconnected with Joe. After contacting Joe at his place of employment, the police station put them in touch with him. Joe managed to arrange a dinner date for them all. It was a lovely occasion. Joe was pleased to be the one making them grin, as the mother and boy appeared to be enjoying themselves. He encouraged Tyrese to never lose his good heart and reassured him that he had done the right thing. He ought to act only out of moral obligation and never out of expectation of profit. The small child thanked you for your nice remarks and pledged to always try his hardest. At the restaurant, they clicked photos of each other, which were then uploaded to the internet. Similar to the last post, this one too went viral. This time, the police officer, the woman, and her kid gained even more notoriety when local news outlets and bloggers showed an interest in the story and covered it. Tyrese, the young one, was amazed with everything. He appeared to be dreaming. It was still hard for him to comprehend that he had been the victim of all this just for having decided to assist an elderly woman. Almost overnight, he went viral on the internet, and everyone praised and thanked him for being such a kind youngster whenever they saw him. But there was even another surprise in store for them. He and his family were having supper one day when there was a tap on the door. Someone had delivered a box right at their door. It was unexpected by all of them and left them all shocked. They were all horrified to their core as they went to investigate. It was an e-bike, one of the priciest models available. It had a message on it saying that Tyrese was receiving it as a present for being such a wonderful youngster. The adolescent lad was ecstatic beyond measure. His good fortune was beyond belief. He had expressed on social media how much he would want to have that specific brand of e-bike just a few months prior. It was simply too costly for his parents to afford. They looked for a sender and couldn't find one. It was as though the person who gave him the bike intended to stay unidentified. He said that this was the cherry on top and that he would never change. He would make sure that at least one person smiled every day and would keep being the unselfish guy that he was. There was something strange about the iceberg that these three fishermen noticed. The discovery they made altered their lives. Alan Russell, Mallory Heron, and Cliff Russell are good friends who like to go fishing together. This made it even more ideal to develop such a pastime into a successful company. They started a fishing business and purchased a fishing boat. One of the hardest jobs on the globe has to be fishing. It's critical to rise early in order to plan ahead and get ready for anything the sea may have in store. To bring in a large haul of fish, fishermen must also use a great deal of energy and time in the water. The three of them cherish their time together, despite the fact that it can be challenging at times. They would never have guessed that day would have such a profound impact on their lives at such an early age. As usual, they all prepared to go. Mallory was feeling optimistic about her day. She was unaware of what was ahead for the entire group that day, though. Who would have guessed that the simplest part of the task was actually getting the boat ready? Cliff, Alan, and Mallory enjoyed sharing stories and making jokes to kill time. Despite having known one another for a very long period, they were never at a loss for conversation topics. They stopped the boat's motor when they got to their location and stayed there. They thought that today would be just like every other day because they had always had fantastic luck catching crabs there. The three of them were astounded by what they saw when it came time to remove the cages. It proved to be the greatest day they had had thus far. After finishing their job there, they reasoned that moving to the icier water would increase their luck. But the further out they took the boat, the greater risk they realized they would be taking. They could not even see birds that far off from the coast. They were unconcerned, though, because everything appeared serene and tranquil. In actuality, though, this was untrue. Who would have guessed that there was a background problem? In the Labrador Sea, icebergs may be seen drifting in large numbers. Because of this, even seasoned anglers should avoid the region. These fishermen may have an accident or possibly lose their lives if they failed to notice crucial information or made a wrong turn while traveling. There was something strange about this particular iceberg, even though they were common in this area of the ocean. They all sensed something off about the iceberg, but none of them could identify it. There was a black area at the top. They were so far away that it was hard to identify what it was. Mallory assumed it was a seal attempting to soak up some sun. Upon examining the creature through his binoculars, Alan informed the others that it did not resemble a seal in the slightest. The animal's movements have a peculiar quality. They concurred that it was critical to go closer to the iceberg. Now, they were all inquisitive. They were aware that deviating from their customary path posed a danger, but Alan was able to persuade the others that the chance was worthwhile. The fur of the creature stuck on the iceberg was quickly revealed. It was also evident to them that it was quite damp. They realized the little animal might not make it very far because of the strong wind blowing from that direction. It was crucial that they go cautiously through the frigid waters. They were aware that if a chunk of ice fell beneath their boat, it may sustain some harm. The waves started to become bigger, which made things much more difficult. The boat's motion became increasingly erratic. Mallory cautioned Cliff and Alan to exercise caution. Additionally, they were afraid that the poor animal would get so terrified that it would just leap into the sea. It was critical that they accelerate the boat if they were to stay ahead of the iceberg. You can only imagine how much more difficult it was to find the iceberg. They were eventually able to get a better look at the animal when they drew closer to the iceberg. They noticed that it resembled a dog in form. They could tell the animal was shivering and drenched from that point on. It dawned on them that cooperation was essential to save this helpless animal. To make sure it wouldn't freeze to death, they had to exert every effort. They at last understood what this beast was when they drew nearer to the iceberg. It was an Arctic fox, not a seal. They were too busy wondering how it got there. The team had to postpone their fishing trip while they worked out a solution. The fox was drenched and cold. Not only that, but there was not much time left to reach safety. It had to be saved. But there was another issue. Was the poor fox going to put its life in their hands now? They had to tame this beast with their hands extended as the first task. But this Arctic fox was nothing like a domesticated home pet. It just retreated, not approached. At that point, the fox began to approach them. It was well aware that this was its sole means of escape. The fox approached the boat cautiously. The fox quickly moved away from the fisherman, indicating that it was afraid. It was damp and chilly as it curled up in the corner. Before the fox died, it was crucial that they get it warm. They still had a few miles to travel before they reached the beach, and Mallory was in charge of navigating the boat back home. The animal may be kept warm by the sawdust the others discovered in the boat. After that, they used the sawdust to make the small animal a cozy bed. It should be sufficient to keep heat in. The fox quickly hid itself in the sawdust. They also took care to position it in the boat's sunniest area. As they returned to the shore, they let it sleep. For now, the fox was warm and alive. Mal offered fish and crab to the animal, but it declined to consume them. They were very certain that it would be ravenous. Mallory pulled out 2 Vienna sausages and tossed them into the river, giving them to the fox. The fox seemed to think this was preferable. The fox went back to sleep after devouring all the sausages that they had left for him. It remained asleep till they reached the coast. Once they reached the Canadian beach, they had to decide on the best course of action for this animal. She remembered one specific location that she believed would be ideal for this fox. Since it wasn't too far from the beach, she decided it would be a good idea to release it there. They granted the fox complete autonomy over decision-making. The trash can was placed on the ground close to the doghouse. The animal remained inside the container for a short period, but then it clambered out of the cage. It started examining its new surroundings after shaking off the sawdust from its fur. It seemed to be calming down as it began to investigate its surroundings. It actually looked rather comfortable over there. It was finally time to return to their boat and the dock. Now that they'd accomplished their goals, it was time to head home. We have no doubt that they will always remember this dreadful day. They would remember that fantastic trip for the rest of their lives. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.